Hey, welcome back to the Sports Idol Podcast. Our guest here is Gib Arnold. He is a sports psychology professional. He's been a D1 head coach in basketball and a D1 basketball player. He is a sports junkie, I would say. I listened to him last night talking to a few hundred high school students, and what he had to say blew my mind. And so we got him in here in studio today, and really happy to have you.
Appreciate it. It's good to be here.
Yep. So, Gib, do you want to walk us through your background a little bit and kind of how you got here, and tell us kind of your background in sports and whatnot? Maybe start even as a player and as youth in your journey.
Okay. I actually grew up in a sports family. My father was a college basketball coach. He spent 30 years coaching. Some of my earliest memories as a young kid was when he coached at UCLA with a coach by the name of John Wooden. Won a few games. I think they won in his last 4 years. He was his assistant his last 4 years. So my earliest memories were of sitting in Pauley Pavilion and watching those teams that won 3 national championships. And then from there, he had his journey. And as a coach's son, that's a big part of life. We didn't talk politics or religion around the table. We talked sports. We talked X's and O's and matchup zones and those type of things. So raised in that, followed in played, was fortunate enough to receive a basketball scholarship to Arizona State and played there. And then I ended up transferring to UC San Diego and finished my playing career at UC San Diego. And then never wanted to leave the huddle, actually.
Yeah.
And so followed in my father's footsteps and began a coaching career. When I was still in college, I actually volunteered at a local high school, and that was my first taste of coaching, and became a junior college coach, and then just worked my way up the ladder, coaching at various places: Loyola Marymount University, Vanderbilt, Pepperdine, University of Southern California, College of Southern Idaho, and University of Hawaii were all the colleges that I spent time with. And loved it, just was fortunate. It was an incredible journey. I had the opportunity in 2015 to join my childhood favorite team, the Boston Celtics, on front office role. And so, although I wasn't in coaching, I was within the organization, and that was cool. That was amazing for me. Not only were they my favorite team, just being around the NBA, and I did a lot of scouting. So spent a lot of time in NBA arenas, a lot of time in college arenas throughout the country, looking at players trying to build an NBA championship team with the Celtics, and that was incredible.
And that was 2015?
Yeah, I did that from 2015 to 2020.
Okay.
And when I was with the Celtics, I got this crazy idea that I wanted to maybe go back to school, and it was based on my time with the Celtics, as well as my 20, 30 years of playing and coaching, that there was just a lot of players out there that were suffering from mental health issues. And, when I was a player, we didn't talk about that stuff. We talked about it earlier, that was weakness. You were weak.
Yeah, you were weak.
You wouldn't dare say, I'm not feeling it today. That was a sign of weakness. And yet I was seeing it more and more, and it was becoming more apparent. And
not only was it a sign of weakness, you would get harassed.
Oh yeah,
about it, right?
No, you couldn't. You couldn't bring it up. And if anyone did, well, your coaches wouldn't allow it.
Yeah.
And your teammates would jump on it. And so, but it was there. It was there. All of us experienced it. It was always there. And as a coach, I didn't really understand it. I would have players that had. Were struggling, but I didn't know the signs. I mentioned one of my all-time favorite players I coached was DeMar DeRozan. Was able to recruit him. He was Compton High School. I was at USC at the time, and from the time I was 15 years old, I recruited him. He joined us at SC, and was only there for 1 year, and then went to the NBA. But had a great year, and but he would always come in into my office, and we'd have these conversations. And I could just tell there was something there, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And years later, he came out with, severe depression. And I look back, like, had I known then what I know now, could I have helped him through some of those really, really tough times? And that was kind of in the back of my mind when I was with the Celtics. And decided to apply for the master's program in psychology there, and was fortunate enough to get in. And my very first class was clinical psychology. And I was taking it in the summer. I didn't have time to do it full time because I was still working with the Celtics, but I didn't have as much travel when I was in the summer. So I took a summer course, and within 20 minutes, I just knew. I knew this is something different. This resonates with me. I could feel it,
Yeah.
I could feel the power of it. And I thought, I love this. Like, this is powerful.
Was there anything specific about that first 20 minutes that got
really,
you? Or?
I really don't remember the actual lecture. It's funny, I've talked to the professor since then. She still teaches there. She teaches a motivational course, and I come on as a guest lecturer every once in a while there. And I've mentioned that with her. And I said, I don't know what it was. I don't know what you were talking about. It was just, as you spoke, I just knew that this was something that hit me. Ironically enough, my father was a basketball coach. My mother was a child psychologist and university professor. She taught child development in college. And so I joke all the time, Dad, I spent 25 years following your footsteps. Mom, I'm going to spend the next 25 following yours. And then for the next 25 years, I'm going to figure out what I want to do. So that's how I kind of stumbled into it, was just I took a class. I took a course. And I was hooked. And so I ended up spending about 3.5 years at Harvard there, and still working on research and thing through Harvard on. My research has always been based on mental and emotional strength training to enhance athletic performance and overall athletic well-being. So it's a long term, but it says it kind of in that one sentence. So my focus in 2020, I left the Celtics and started going full time with MindBodySoul, and now I just work with athletes on the mental and emotional side of performance and the science of greatness, and keeps me real busy, and it's just growing. It's taken off, so it's a lot of fun.
So yeah, last night I obviously watched you at Folsom High School, and there was a few hundred kids there, and I was taken back right from the beginning of your presentation when you explained fight, flight, and then there was a third one that I didn't know about until last night, which was freeze. Yeah. Right, and so. You want to talk a little bit about that and just kind of go through there, because I thought that so those were, I had a couple takeaways. I'll just say there was that one, and then there was about the negative thoughts. Yeah. I think towards the end of it,
the inner critic.
The inner critic,
huge,
which really resonated with me personally. Yep. And then the repetition of thoughts. That like I didn't realize how much we repeat these thoughts, but I've.
Over 90% of our thoughts we already had.
Yeah, I kind of have the same thoughts daily. And so now I'm thinking about the thoughts that I have daily and trying to figure out how to get rid of those. So we can get into that later.
You bet. But, that's a great conversation, by the way.
Yeah, so I do want to make sure and touch on that before we leave, so we can tell the audience, because maybe they're feeling the same way. But if you could talk a little bit about the fight, flight, or freeze, just to kind of get us going. Yeah.
So I really can't start a discussion in without going to who we are at our core. And we are, we all come from someone, yeah, and that person came from someone, and so on and so on. So we have this incredible evolution of us, of ourself, that over thousands and thousands of years of man. And so when we look at who we really are, it starts with our DNA and what we come from. And so, if we're talking about the original man, and I use an analogy which is just really simple, but I think people understand it, is at one time our ancestors were all sitting in probably not a room as nice as this, somewhere outside in some kind of a village atmosphere. I don't know. They probably didn't have writing or much structure, but they were sitting around, and in walked something they had never seen before. And I always use the analogy of a saber-toothed tiger. It's great. You hear it in psychology all the time. Like the saber-toothed tiger walks into, I don't know if they ever did, but it doesn't matter. What happened is, of that group, 3 things happened to them instinctually. There was a group that immediately saw this beast and, didn't really know what it was, but their body intrinsically told them fear. The chemical reaction would have been cortisol, would have been just splashed through the body, and their response to that would be to freeze. Literally, sometimes they could have just right then just froze, or they would have walked away and just hid and curled up and hid behind a rock or whatever. The response, their natural response, was to freeze. And so then you have another group who stood up, and maybe cortisol came in through the body, fear, stress, anxiety, but a huge rush of adrenaline as well. And their response wasn't to freeze, their response was to run. And they fled, so that's your flight, and just took off. And then there was a third group that when they could have had the cortisol, they could have had the adrenaline as well, they definitely had adrenaline that went through their body, and their response wasn't to freeze, it wasn't to run. Possibly the thoughts that went through their mind were, hey, it gets cold here in the winter. That furry thing that just walked in, that looks kind of warm. I'm hungry. Looks like it's got some nutrients, some meat maybe there. And rather than fleeing or freezing, they picked up, a club or a rock or just with their hands, and they went forward and they fought. And so you have every one of us, and if we go all the way back there, those that froze probably didn't make it, Those that froze behind a rock maybe had a chance. Those that ran probably survived for another day until something happened. Those that fought, if they were able to survive, then they continued on. And these groups continued to breed and have children, and eventually, they survived. And then they had children. Those children survived until we got till today. So each one of us has a little bit of that in us. Like we have flight, we have fight, and we have freeze. It's running through our DNA. Now, no saber-toothed tiger is going to come through this, I hope not, through this right now. I rarely have situations in life where I feel like my life is threatened. It would be very rare. Military, those in the military and those at war have these feelings running through them every day, and we see this in the military where the soldiers react by fighting, fleeing, or freezing. Mm-hmm. But one of the closest things that we have today in our society is sports, where we have this conflict, this competition, this opponent that comes into play. And our body can't recognize the difference between a saber-toothed tiger, someone breaking into our home, or our crosstown rival coming into our gym and playing it. It has the same reaction. And as an athlete, we flee, we fight, and we freeze. Sometimes all three, or one more than the other. So once we understand that's where we come from, then it's our job today to understand self, be aware of self, and know what triggers each one of those, and how to, in athletics, I'd rather have that guy that picked up the club and went forward, right, as a coach. Yeah. That's the guy I'm recruiting, is the one that when adversity hits and they don't run, they don't freeze, they get up and they fight. And that's what we want to. We want to tap into that part of our self. We want to tap into that person that is within us, and then train it to where we can bring it out when we best need it. Now, freezing and fleeing aren't necessarily bad. In fact, we need those. Cortisol necessarily isn't bad. We need that. Stress isn't bad. We need that. In fact, it can be good. But in sports, if we're just talking sports, the fight is really, really good. We got to have that fight in us. Yeah. But then you also have to hit the calm side of us. So you got to change the mindset from fighting to calm. Within minutes, if not seconds, a basketball player, he's fighting, he's getting a rebound, he gets fouled. Now he's got to go sit at the free throw line, and if he's still got this fight in him, he's not going to have as smooth as form to make this the free throw. So being able to go back and forth is a huge part of an athlete's ability to become their best self, their best athlete.
Right. So you talked about a little bit. There was two different types because there's physical reactions and in sports. How is it? Go ahead and tell the audience the two different types that we had, and then what were the differences?
Okay, so there's a theory of competitive and threat state in sports. I assume that's what you're talking about.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah, the theory of competitive and threat state in athletics, and we can actually now we have the ability to now test athletes in different ways through heart rate, through hooking them up to different things, and we can actually see which athletes are in threat and which athletes are in challenge state, and there's a difference between those. So you have you have your team and spending.
So threat and challenge.
Threat and challenge.
Threat and challenge.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Threat and challenge state are the two terms. So the theory of threat and challenge state in athletics, and let's say we got a group of 10, a team of 10, and we're about to go play a game. We're sitting in the locker room. We literally could monitor all of them, and through science could find out which one of these are in threat state and which one of these are currently in challenge state. And so the difference between the two is quite a big difference. Now, just because you're in threat state doesn't mean you're not going to perform. But what happens in threat state is pretty incredible mentally, emotionally, and physically. The physical side of the body, you will actually, there's something called vasoconstriction, and that's when your blood vessels will actually get smaller. And blood will rather than going to the extremities, it will be centralized into the core of the body. So the body reacts in threat state by sending all the blood to the core. The science behind that, and there's theories behind that, is that, well, when you were fighting this saber-tooth tiger, if you got your arm cut off, you wouldn't bleed out. You could still possibly survive. I don't know about that. Like, you could read a lot about why the body does that, but it doesn't. Okay, it doesn't.
Is that why people get sick before games? Like,
you
hear people
most
throwing
definitely.
up, and
most definitely.
I remember feeling nauseous before games sometimes, and just like.
And there's people that feel that there's actually people that feel like they. When you have all that blood going to the core, it's similar to, after Thanksgiving. You got all that, your digestive system's working. And it's, you may feel a little sluggish, so a little bit like you're not really in tune. You're kind of like in this little bit of a blur. So that's a very real part of athletes. Now, is it enough to where they can't get up and perform? No. But it does affect their overall ability in some way. So you have vasoconstriction.
Okay.
Now, that's in threat state. In challenge state, that's the same member of that team who's in challenge state, the exact opposite happens. They actually, their blood vessels actually vasodilate, so they become bigger. And more blood is flowing through the system, which means, and it's going to the extremities, so that goes to their hands, and they have better touch. It goes to their major muscle organs, and to their organs. And so now they have more blood, more oxygen in their calves and in their biceps and in all their major muscles. And so anaerobic power increases. And so when you start talking the science of it, because of that vasodilation, they actually become a better athlete. Not only that, but that same blood goes up to the brain. And now you have cognitive awareness is increased. And you have positive thoughts. Your focus is increased. Now, on the other side, we go back to threat state. They have more negative thoughts. They have more they're not as focused. They're not as clear when you're in threat state. You feel you have, rather than having adrenaline, which is released in challenge state, cortisol is released in threat state. So you have two different chemicals running through your body. Now, the cortisol is a stress mechanism, and it's causing stress. The adrenaline is kind of pumping you up. We all felt adrenaline. It's like, yeah, let's do this. So now you have someone who's stressful, who's stressed, and someone who's pumped. Okay, now there's times when it's probably better to have cortisol than adrenaline. One of those times is not sports. It's actually much better. I'd rather have my linebacker loaded up with adrenaline You know, his eyes dilated, then in feeling cortisol, you know, pupils closed, feeling sluggish and afraid. I mean, it's just the body, it reacts differently. So those two states are real. Like that is, athletes are in those states. And what we found is that how that happens is dependent upon how the body, if the body believes it has the resources to engage, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Like it's something that this is, you cannot fake the body. Like you can, there's a lot of things that you can fake. Like you can fake, you know, cockiness over confidence. You don't, I'm this, but the body knows. And if the body perceives that you don't have the resources to engage, its job is to protect you. So again, that saber-tooth tiger walks into the group. If the body perceived it had the resources to engage, those are the ones that stood up, grabbed a club, and fought. If the body perceives it doesn't have the resources to engage, those are the ones that froze or fled. And that's how the body functions. Now, the same thing happens in sports. If you believe you have the resources to engage, the body's going to help you out. It's going to send you more blood. Your heart rate's going to increase in both states, but where that blood goes and how that blood flows is different in both states. Your body's going to release chemicals in both states, but which ones more so than the others is different in each state. So obviously, if as a coach, I want my players in challenge state. I want to figure out how do we get in challenge state. So the key is, how do we then define resources to engage? How do we, I talk with my athletes all the time. Every one of us leaves every morning, the house, the apartment, with a resource bag on our back. And the resource bag is when we are put in competition, it's what we reach into to engage.
Right.
So the more resources we have back in that bag, the more apt we are to be into challenge state and have the good stuff running through our bodies, versus in threat state where the body's telling us, no, you got to survive. Get back to the cave. Go hide. Which
you're not ready for this.
Yeah, you're not ready. You're not
ready. Yeah.
Exactly. You're not ready. And the body perceives that you're not ready. So, yeah, the same people that sat in that group and was told to go hide in the cave is now us. You know, thousands and thousands of years later, we're come from the same lineage. And now the body might be telling us, you're not ready. Don't be vulnerable. Don't go out there. And then that's when the inner critic kicks in, because it also is a survival mechanism for us. So once we understand that, then it comes very basic. We need resources. What are these resources? I want resources to engage. I want my body to perceive resources to engage, not to perceive I don't have the resources to engage. Okay, so the next question naturally is, how do I get these resources?
That is the question. How do I get the resource? Well,
and for $19.99,
is that so? So is the question? The question is, what happens when you have a kid or an adult, a kid, an athlete that actually has the resources, but maybe doesn't think he has the resources? How do you deal with that?
Oh, that's a great question.
And I would think that happens a lot in middle school and in high school when kids are developing and they're playing, you know, because especially like if you ever look at like 8th graders, it's the most odd age for boys, right? Because you have these, 4'10" guys, which I was one of those, right? And then you've got these kids that are like 6'3", 6'4", and it's just and they look fully developed, and so. If you have, let's say, in that situation, this kid, and he's got a lot of resources, but he's looking at this guy going like, "There's no way." I mean, how do you get that kid to believe that there is a way?
Sure. So, and that's the beautiful thing of the mind. Okay. And I refer to a term often. I call it, I refer to mental monsters.
Okay.
And the mental monster is the athlete that has the ability to tap into his fight or his or her fight response when necessary, and just as easily tap into the calmness and focus side of self. And so this athlete that is able to very fluidly go from fight and attack to sit back and observe and be calm and to breathe, there's no weakness, because we need both in sports. You can't always be on. There needs to be cognitive awareness. There needs to be calm. There needs to be times when we're thinking more than just reacting. And there's also times where we just need to react. Okay, and different positions in different sports. Yeah, the quarterback is a little different than the linebacker, right? A golfer, is a lot different than say a power forward, right? There's just different parts of the mind, and so you're going back to your question is, how do we teach them this? How do we get them this? Well, it's like the muscle. Like we have to train the mind, just like we train the body, and that's where when I entered down this path, I started looking back at my own coaching, and I think I did a really good job with the body. I thought my athletes were bigger, stronger, faster because we spent a lot of time in the gym, and I understood that. I understood technique. I thought we did things really well, and I think for the most part, American coaches, we're great at it. Our athletes are bigger, stronger, and faster. But how much time do we spend training the mind? Because the difference between good and great eventually comes down to the mental side. I don't really remember ever sitting my athletes down that often and coaching the mental side, or coaching even more so. What we're finding today is the emotional side.
Right.
And that's anger and fear and those things that our athletes feel. The mental side is more like confidence. And then the body is obviously strength and endurance. We're really good in strength and endurance, but we don't do a great job with the mind, and as I call it, the soul, which would be the emotional side. And so we have to train the mind, and we have to train the soul, just like we train the body. So that 8th grader, probably in the 8th grade, has spent a lot of time playing and doing and working on his sport, and just whatever he has naturally through is who he's going to be when these mental issues come up. Now, but that doesn't mean how he was born is how he's going to end, right?
Right.
Like he's got to train that side of his. He needs to train his mind, and once he starts training his mind, even if he wasn't born with it, through neuroplasticity, that mind, he can become that mental monster. Okay. He can prepare himself for battle.
Okay.
Yeah. But some might just be able to show up and they naturally have that. Not all of us are like that. Yeah. But just because we weren't born that way doesn't mean we can't become that. And that's where mental training comes in.
Right. Now, what about that kid specifically in that situation though? Is there a cue that he can use for himself? Or are there some standard things that he could tap into?
Sure.
If he's not, if he's looking and he's fearful, and then he says, "Okay, I got to do what are
techniques.
some techniques that I could just say, like, how could I get myself out of that and not focus on that, or maybe be prepared for battle?"
Yeah. So great question. We're skipping one step to get to that.
Yeah.
But that's how we get there. First thing that most athletes who struggle with this is actually awareness of self. Like if you're not aware that you're off, you're not going to change it.
Okay.
And so you don't know if you're in challenge or threat state.
Oh boy. So he's got to figure that out. So
you don't even know.
Okay.
You don't know. The outward symptoms are almost exactly the same. Those in challenge state, increased heart rate. Those in threat state, increased heart rate. Okay. So those in challenge state usually, breathing a little bit hard before the game. You can be in threat state and also, be breathing a little. So as you're entering into a game, you can physically look the same way. Now, there's a little bit of things you can maybe tap into, like if a player's eyes are dilated, they're probably in challenge state. If they're getting small, they're probably in threat state, but not always.
It's really hard to see.
Yeah, you're not looking around at somebody's eyes.
I don't even think you can see my pupils.
Yeah, someone in a helmet. That might be a physical thing that you can see. But overall, if you're not aware of self, you don't know. You you don't know. And then all of a sudden the performance happens, and then you look back and you're like, I just didn't have it today.
Yeah.
I just didn't have it today. Well, why didn't my body perform? And you see these athletes, and a great is like track, to where it's the same thing over and over and over, and then all of a sudden they run this, and then the next race they're off. What's the difference? It's the same person. It may have been the very next day is a different meet. Why were they faster? Why were they? The body just wasn't ready to engage, and so you have to look back. So you got to start. It starts with becoming aware of self.
Okay.
And so the techniques of being aware of self, I think the best one is meditation or mindfulness,
okay,
which allows us to, once we start taking the time to breathe and start just noticing our feelings and sitting in our feelings and taking the time to look inward rather than outward, we start having a better awareness of self, and we're able to much quicker understand, hey, I'm a little off today. And once we are aware of self, then we start saying, oh, okay, I was off. What I need to acknowledge what is off. So you go first with aware.
Okay.
And the technique you're talking about would be the best technique. There's a lot of techniques, but I think the best one is meditation, is taking the time to meditate. And that doesn't happen like the day of the game, right?
This is preparation.
This is preparation.
Yeah.
This is months, weeks, days, years.
A lot of this is preparation, right? Like,
yeah.
I get
So
it.
you don't send an athlete out there that hasn't practiced the skill set of whatever sport he's doing, but we'll send him out there all the time without the skill set of the mental part of the sport all the time. So meditation would be something that the athlete does every day in preparation for the game day, and then when they're there, they become aware. The second part of that is, and I call this formula straight A's, by the way.
Okay.
So you have aware, and then the next step is acknowledge. Okay, so once you're aware that you're off, you then acknowledge what part of me is off. Now, there's three things make us up, makes me up, makes you up. Myself, I love that term, myself. It's only me. I'm my only self. Myself consists of my mind, my body, and my soul. And that's the name of my company, right? MindBodySoul.
Gotcha.
So the mind is am I mentally off? Okay, and you're mentally, maybe my confidence is down. That's a big part of the mind. Is my body off? Am I tired? Maybe I'm fatigued. Maybe I'm injured. Okay, or is my soul off? Are my emotion? Am I angry? Is there something wrong with my soul, or is there something off? And so the reason that's important is because if we have the mind and the body and the soul, and for us to reach our best athlete, all three of those have to be firing. We call that pure performance. It's also called the zone.
Right.
When you're in the zone, your mind and your body and soul are just firing.
Like when they say people are unconscious right now.
Yeah, they are. Like everything is in tune. They're all working together and they're all moving forward. If one of those isn't in tune, if physically I could be at my prime, emotionally I could be happy, but mentally I can be off. They're all connected. I can't reach that pure performance because my mind is keeping me down. So in order to become best athlete, best self, we need to first determine which one of these is off. Because if the soul is off, but we have a soul problem and we come up with a physical solution, it might be temporary, but it's not lasting. We need a soul solution for soul problems, physical body solution for body problems, and mental solutions for mental problems. Okay? That does me no good to work harder in the gym if I'm if I'm emotionally unstable. Like I can go lift and run and practice, but come game time, if anger comes quickly, if the first bad call by the referee, I flip out, it doesn't matter. So a lot of times we think, and as coaches, we got to just work harder. We got to get in the gym more. Got to lift harder. Got to study more. But okay, if it's a physical problem, you're right. If we're not running the plays correctly, if we're not strong enough, yeah, you're right. That's a physical problem, physical solution. Body problem, body solution. But if I don't have confidence, right, that's a mental issue. Like, what am I doing to train the mind? Or if my emotions are way off, what am I doing to help with my emotions? So the second part is acknowledging mind, body, or soul. So that 8th grader might be kind of tough. You know, they're 8th graders, but they can do it. So once we acknowledge our mind, our body, or our soul, which one of those is off, then the next step that you're talking about comes in, and that's the adjustment phase. That's the third A.
Okay.
And the adjustment is just that. It's the techniques I use. And if we can line up the mental adjustments with our mental problems and the physical adjustments with our physical problems and the emotional adjustments for then that can become permanent versus temporary. If we cross adjust, it's temporary.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So you can get into the gym and go harder, and that might help your confidence a little bit because you say, I went harder, but then adversity hits and you realize, oh, well, I'm really not that confident. Or this guy went to the gym just as much as me. So we got to match him up.
Okay.
And those are the adjustments. And so now we start understanding, okay, so what are mind adjustments, what are physical adjustments, and what are soul adjustments?
Right.
And that's the technique that you're talking about. And then the last one is we then take those adjustments and we put them into some kind of an action plan. So we actually have to eventually act upon those adjustments. And then we start it again.
Gotcha.
So an athlete actually can do this in the game. You can have game time adjustments, mental, physical, and emotional, and in life. You know, you can look back on a competition and say, why wasn't I pure? Why wasn't I in the zone? And then you can look back and start saying, well, maybe I didn't do this, maybe I didn't. Let me try this. And so we're constantly, these mental monsters as I talk about, they're constantly looking for that adjustment. How do I just get a little bit, I call it incremental increase, just a little bit of change to where I can get a little bit better over and over and over again. And through time, eventually, now your mind, body, and soul are all
connected.
They're always hitting. And then there's athletes like that. They always show up. We saw it with Messi.
Yeah.
You know, just last week, his debut in America, everybody's there. All the cameras are on him. You know, he could have very easily but that's Messi. That's a monster. And he was great.
Yeah, some people just seem better when in the big moments.
Yeah, and you see it with you can name the athletes. You know, you got the Tom Brady's. They just always showed up, right? They always showed up.
Brady, Jordan, Kobe.
Yeah. They're just this. You
big
hear
moments.
Big moments, big
performance.
Because they're mentally, their mind, body, and soul are all firing, and they've had their resource bag is huge.
Yeah.
Not because they just showed up that day and are all of a sudden great. No, because from the time they were Michael Phelps, from the time he was 13 years old, visualized winning Olympic gold every night before he went to bed. Every night. He'd done it thousands and thousands and thousands of times by the time he actually did it 18 times. Like, it wasn't new to him.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't just show up. He did it over and over and over. So those are the techniques that, visualization, meditation, those are the type of things that we can work on once we understand where the issue is.
So if that 8th grader is there,
okay,
is there like a breathing technique that he
Sure.
could do to what would some of be the fundamentals that you don't maybe have to have? Obviously, it'd be better if you had all of that worked out. But let's say I'm in 8th grade. I don't know any of this, anything about anything, but I just know that I can feel something's off, or I'm scared, or I'm nervous. Is there something that kid could do to calm down?
Okay.
You would just say, hey, why don't you just start with
so the 8th grader,
right?
being an 8th grader, he understands he's nervous.
Yeah, he's nervous.
Okay,
but like real nervous.
So he may not even know that he's aware of that, but he knows he's nervous.
Yeah.
He may not.
He knows he's doubting.
Sometimes
right
you
now.
can look if he's going like this. If as a coach, if I got someone that needs to shoot a technical foul and he's going like this, I'm probably not going to choose that guy, right?
Right.
The guy that's sitting there like, I got this, coach.
Yeah.
Okay. So he's nervous. Yes, there is a thing. So you have. Let's get to the science of it. In your brain, you have the parasympathetic nervous system, and you have the sympathetic nervous system.
Okay.
So the parasympathetic nervous system, if you were to line those two, the sympathetic nervous system is fight, it's challenge state, right? It's go. It's the you can often read about the parasympathetic and the sympathetic.
Okay, so the sympathetic is what you're talking about.
So we're talking about the
okay.
The sympathetic nervous system is the accelerator, which in sports we want that a lot.
Okay.
But there's times when we also need the brake, and that would be the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, if you are feeling anxious and nervous, see, you very likely have a high level of cortisol running through your body.
Right.
And what the parasympathetic nervous system is, it controls calmness. It controls focus. It's over, you can feel more relaxed. So once he identifies this, I'm nervous. Okay, you mentioned it, breath. So breath is the back door into the parasympathetic nervous system.
Okay.
Part of the parasympathetic nervous system is also over breathing. So if this young athlete is able to just take the time and simply breathe, and we teach a 12-second breath, an inhale of 6 to an exhale of 6. 5 breaths in a minute is ideal. It sends a message to self that, hey, I'm okay. I'm in control. You have the resources to engage. So once that message is sent, the body can say, oh, he's okay or she's okay. Well, let's send him the good stuff. Let's slow down on the cortisol. Let's give him a little adrenaline. Let's have him vasodilate a little bit, a little more to his brain so he can focus a little better, a little more anaerobic power so he can perform. Because if he does or she does have the resources to engage, it's our job to help him. That's what the body does. So let's do it. So yeah, through breath, you can actually slow down and change the chemicals that are being splashed through your body just by tapping into the parasympathetic nervous system. And one of the techniques would most definitely be breath. Now, can you do that in the middle of a game? Yeah, you actually can.
You can, yeah.
If you've done it hundreds and thousands of times up to that game.
Right.
You're not going to all of a sudden just create that and get that skill set in the middle of the game.
Right.
Like if you
Something you should practice.
So yeah, so that's mental training.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
That's
I did my breaths today, just so you know.
There you
from
go.
Your training
You did your
last
meditate
night.
10. Okay, good.
I took 10 minutes.
Okay.
I actually kicked my feet up above because I'd just done a workout. And I was like, I just need to chill out for a minute. And so I did the six seconds in, 6 seconds out, and I got up and I felt really good.
Yeah,
just
Buddha,
like kind of reset.
Yeah, Buddha's so far in front of his time. Like
I did have my 5-year-old bust in the middle
Yeah.
of it. And I was like, get out of here. Like, come on.
So neuroscientists are
great,
just
though.
now kind of starting to figure out how brilliant Buddha and the boys were, right? Like
Right.
the idea of meditation and breath and all that was taught. We've known that for thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
Not thousands, a couple thousand years. But yeah, that stuff works. Maybe they called it a third eye or a chakra, or they'd use different terms. Now we can actually label that scientifically what's happening, like what the blood's doing, what the blood vessels are doing, what the oxygen is being increased here and there in the part of the body. We actually can follow that, the same stuff that was being taught thousands of years ago.
So
now,
you're saying a 6 and 6. I've heard a couple different breathing techniques, and so I want to
there are more than one, by the way.
Yeah,
most
definitely.
definitely.
And so do you think that's individualized on what works for
Yes.
you? Okay,
Yes.
I got you. Because I've heard like the Navy SEALs a little bit different, aren't they?
Sure.
Like 4 in, hold for 4 hours, something like that. And then I've heard this guy Gary Brecka. He's talked about. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's talked about I think for 30 seconds at a time. They're very short breaths.
Yeah.
Very short and fast. So is there like a
So if you're sending,
and you're supposed to
it
cycle
depends
through that.
upon the message you want to send to self.
okay? Oh, okay.
So yeah, so if you want sympathetic nervous system, which is fight and flight, okay, sympathetic, you want short breaths. You want.
Interesting.
You don't want your linebacker going, right? You don't want him.
Right.
You want him in short. It sends the message that, oh, we're in fight. We're in fight. Let's go. We need this. We let's go. Like, so that's a short breath explosion. Short breaths are more with bursts.
Okay.
Okay. A runner doesn't want to breathe like that.
Long distance runner? Yeah.
Wants to have that.
Right.
Wants to have that. Wants to send the body that I'm in control. Let's flow. Let's move. So there's different, and there's many different. And I am by no means a master of all of them. I'll hear a new one and I'll read up and I'm like, oh, that makes sense. I wish I need to maybe study this more.
Right.
Just like in meditations.
Yeah.
So the one that I introduced last night was the one I introduced my athletes to. I call it the MindBodySoul meditation.
Yeah.
And it's 10 minutes, meditate 10. I love to have all my athletes every morning meditate 10. And it has 3 different aspects to it, one of which isn't even a part of meditation. I sneak in visualization. But I call it the meditate 10 process. So it depends. And then obviously all of us are different. We all have different DNA and different things affect us. So we have to, but that comes with the training, and we find what fits us.
I gotcha.
And that gets into pre-performance
If I
routines.
was that linebacker, let's say I'm in a game, third quarter, fourth quarter, big play coming up, and I feel myself, I'm a little too up.
Oh, yeah.
Then would I just take a few short breaths, like just a few longer
Long
breaths?
breaths.
Just like,
Exactly.
because I felt that in sports where it's like a big moment, and then it's the crowd is just yelling, and everything's happening so fast, and then I just want to breathe. And I felt like that helps.
It
it's
totally
helped
helps
in the past.
And the beauty of that is it will help you physically, right? It'll help the body, but more so when you understand that because you've practiced it. Mentally, you now know what's happening in your body. Like if you have the shortness of breath and you're in a big moment, mentally, that's when a lot of players collapse because it's overwhelming and the body's starting to like act interesting. And so now, and if you don't understand this, you might feel different. And now, again, you choke. Like this is threat state. This is when like you're losing cognitive awareness. You're like your decision making is a little bit off, and it can start with something physical, like I don't have my breath, and then you kind of spiraled into this. I'm nervous, and now the message being sent to the self is I'm not in control.
Yeah,
I don't have the resources to engage in this moment. Let's shut it down. Cortisol increases, adrenaline now stops, vasodilation occurs, and all these things that are negative towards performance are happening right in the middle of the game. So an athlete who understands himself or herself and sees the physical part of the natural part of our bodies doing this, which is our survival mechanism, our nervous system, is they can now control that by, like you said, breath in this case.
Right.
By just big breath, slow breath, and just sends a little bit of a message, and now the body will follow. So like an athlete going to shoot a free throw. Hey, take a few, you'll watch. And if you watch athletes, a lot of times the NBA players, you'll see them actually physically take a breath.
They got to bring themselves down
before they go into any kind of their routine.
I feel like college sports, specifically basketball and football, a lot in basketball, and you see it in March Madness. You see like a different team show up, right? Maybe this team struggled all year. Maybe they got blown out by somebody that they're about to play during the year, and then they come back and they are a completely different team. Is this something, the challenge mode, and what was the other mode?
Challenge and threat state.
Threat state. Do you think, do you see this in like teams? Do teams sometimes have like a whole team's in threat state? Like they, in a situation where they go and they get blown out, and especially away in college sports is very much in basketball. You see the away, like the home court advantage is a real thing. Is that, do you think that has something to do with it? Challenge and threat, the whole team being in there? Or
I think so. I think there's probably something behind that, whether the entire team is in challenge or threat state. You'd have to measure that at the time. So like going on the road, obviously, teams don't perform as well on the road. Why is that? That plays a role because now you're dealing with what we call relevant and irrelevant cues. Okay. So a relevant cue for an athlete is anything that enhances performance, and you put your time, energy, and commitment into that. So a relevant cue. Athletes, mental monsters, going back to that term, have the ability to focus only on relevant cues. An irrelevant cue would be the referee, the crowd, your girlfriend, the coach, that's screaming at you. Crowd noise is an irrelevant cue. And so now that's added into the mix.
Interesting.
When you go on the road. It becomes, that wasn't in the mix at home. Now, the athlete who is able to maintain focus on the relevant cues, performance, the technique, this play, this shot, this catch, this sprint, okay, they're going to be okay if they're able to do that. But the athlete that now, because of the crowd change, because they didn't sleep in their normal bed, because of the time difference, because this game's on national television, because this game is more important than the last game, they start focusing on the irrelevant cues, which takes away from performance. So when you see entire teams doing that, you kind of probably have to look at, what are they focusing on? Is this team focusing on relevant cues or irrelevant cues? And when it happens on the road, probably focusing on crowd and noise and things like that. Or when it gets when it gets bigger, the more important the game. That's another more things that come into play. Is it too much for them? And so you can see teams, and if you got, and again, in team sports, if you got the majority of the team not performing, it then affects the rest of the team, and they could easily fluctuate down to this flat state, or just you see teams that mentally fold.
I see it in football.
All the time.
Football a lot. You'll see a road team. They come in, they're loose, and then they go up and they're on the verge of an upset against a highly ranked team on the road, and then like middle of third quarter, middle of fourth quarter, like a switch was flipped.
For sure.
And all of a sudden, that team looks nothing like the team you just saw for 3 quarters or 3.5 quarters, and all of a sudden, and then it's like the home team reels off 21 straight and they win, and to me that's one of the things in sports I think that is the most intriguing for me is to
how
understand.
quickly you can go.
Momentum just seems in basketball. You see these, you see them they're up 18 in the first half, and all of a sudden they lose by 20.
Yeah, and so is that a physical thing?
Yeah.
Do they all of a sudden forget how to play football?
They're
doubt
just
it.
missing. You see them miss shots. They're like all of a sudden they're maybe not going for loose balls, or it's just they'll say the ball didn't bounce our way or whatever, and the other team seems like they've just also flipped the switch to like loose.
So here's an interesting thing as a coach. When you're in team sports, an athlete knows himself best, and so you can do this as an athlete within team sports. Why did I not perform, or why did I perform? Part of awareness is not just why I'm off. A big part of awareness is why am I on? Why did I play great? Let's figure that out. So using the straight A's, awareness, acknowledge, adjust, and act. Like when things are going right, you need to be aware of that too. Let's keep that going. But you'll find that when teams start doing that, same thing. You use that same method and you look, well, why in the fourth quarter were we up and they caught up with us? Well, that very well could be physical. You could be fatigued. Maybe your team or yourself, you're not physically in as good a shape as you need to be in the fourth quarter. If it happens over and over, I would look into that. Right? Why?
If I'm a coach, what am I telling my team? Let's say I'm a coach and the momentum's starting to shift against me. I'm sure you've been in this situation on the road, hostile environment. What do you do in that moment? What do you tell your team? I'm sure this happens in youth sports, high school, and all over.
Happens in every sport.
Like, if you're that coach, what do you tell your team?
Okay, so outstanding question again. I can speak from experience here. I used to call it confidence timeouts.
Okay.
And especially on the road, you would need these. I would always write a little thing before of the different things I wanted to do. I just kind of had it with me, a little cheat sheet, I guess you could say. Yeah. Most coaches, you'll see they'll have those. But I would always, especially on the road, put confidence timeouts and circle it down there. So when that shift happens, and it does happen, right? You're dealing with, in college sports.
18 to 22 years or whatever.
Or in youth sports. It's going to happen. It's going to go back and forth. It happens in the NBA. It happens in the NFL. It happens in the highest of the highest levels.
Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, what a great, exactly.
Okay.
Sorry, Falcons fans.
Sorry about that.
So you see it happening. And if it can happen in the Super Bowl, it can happen at the YMCA in a summer league game. So again, having techniques in place for when it happens.
So confidence timeouts?
So as a team, if you're talking about team, then the one person who controls the team would be the coach.
Right.
And so the coach would need in his resource bag, something like a confidence timeout, to where I'm going to call a timeout and they're going to expect me to rip into them. And most of us as coaches, and I've been guilty of this myself, the team is mentally losing it right now. And so what do? I physically rip into them. You got to play harder. You got to, maybe they're playing hard. Maybe they are playing as hard as they can, but they're but mentally right now they're losing this momentum. Maybe emotionally they're upset that they're moving this, and yet I'm telling them to play harder, which is a physical solution for a physical problem. That's the wrong message to send. Okay, and if it is sent, it's temporary because because we're not dealing with. So a mental, like a confidence timeout would be a mental timeout, and that's when your team would come over, expecting to be ripped into, expecting some new play to be put out there to change it, and maybe just let them rest a little bit. You let them breathe, and then you sit down in front of them and you go, you know what, guys? If you were to tell me on the road with 1 minute left that we would be down 1 point before we played this game, I would have taken that 100 out of 100 times. Now, maybe you were just up 18.
Forget about that.
Yeah, maybe you were just up 18. And so all they're thinking is, we just had a 19-point swing.
Yeah.
But instead of ripping them on the 19-point swing, you say, you know what, guys? If you would have told me 1 point down and the ball in our hands with a minute left, yeah, let's do it. That's why we're here.
Gotcha.
And so now you flip it. You flip it. And you start and you give them confidence of, this is why we're here. We got this. We are this. We've done the work. This is why, we've prepared for this. And you don't even touch any of it other than the fact that we got this. So
you're
now,
saying basically forget about what just
exactly.
happened.
We're in the moment, and the
here,
moment
and
is
this,
great.
Yeah, and this moment is, okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
I would take this moment.
Yeah.
And so would
Gotcha.
you.
Like we knew it was going to be a battle coming in, and that was, it just was what it was.
Because on the other side, the interesting thing is that team that is now up 1 at their home, they wouldn't have taken that. Right?
Yeah.
So, but they feel like they've done this great thing because at one time they were down, but now they're up 1. Well, actually, they probably should be up 10 if it's home. But their mindset is, this is great. We were down, but now we're back in this game. So they have the momentum. They have the mental, they naturally have that swag. I got to get that swag back into my team. And it's not physical in this part, it's mental. Now, it could be emotional, which is a different side. It could be feelings. It's a little hard. Team feelings is kind of hard, but individual feelings are real. You can actually address, and if you know your athletes, you can see the ones that maybe you got an athlete that's dropping his head, maybe you got an athlete that's now really concerned about the ref because he's angry. Maybe he's angry with a teammate. You've got to be able to touch that athlete and get to him as quickly, or her as quickly as possible. And if you know that athlete well, and that athlete knows themselves, then you use the techniques to get them back in tune and back with us. And so, yeah, it's a little bit tougher with team sports than it is with individual sports, but very doable.
I feel like it's a lot easier. All right, so the confidence timeout, that's what the coaches have in their resource bag. Coaches should be building their resource bags as well.
Most definitely. Yeah, I mean, we all should be, right? Once you stop learning, you're done.
I feel like the best coaches continue to learn. So I want to tie this resource bag. And so resource bag, we're talking about training. Are we talking about if I was to say for an athlete, speed training, weight training, extra training, like we're building resources with that.
Yeah,
and
that's
so mentally,
that's the physical side of the resource bag. You bet. It's got to be full too.
Right. So mental side, resource bag is?
So the mental side, if you're going to break, again, down to self, would be confidence, and it would be, what are you doing to train your confidence? What are you working on to build confidence? What are you building to your mindset? What are you doing to have a growth mindset? To have a mindset of a mental monster versus someone who's wishy-washy. What is your obviously your intellect plays a huge role in that. What is your knowledge, whether it's of the game, of the team you're playing, of the sport you're in? All these things go into resources. It's just building resources. If you are in a team sport as a coach, you better have a great scout on the team you're playing. Okay, that helps your athletes have a mental mindset going in of understanding how to beat this team.
Like film study.
Film sessions,
This
scouting
is
reports.
Why film, when you watch film as players, it's very helpful.
No doubt. And so what? Again, so that
Resource bag.
that is putting a resource in your resource bag, which right up until that game time, now the body's like feeling all these emotions from this game that's coming up. And the fact that you watch film is one more resource that allows your body to perceive you have the resources to engage. Thus, let's give them the good stuff.
So that
adrenaline.
That is fantastic to hear, because I feel like some kids just don't understand how important watching film is.
So here's they're watching film thinking the coach is making us watch film.
Right.
It's actually for the athlete as much as it is for the overall process of the game. By watching that film, you are sending a message to yourself that I'm prepared, I'm ready, I have the resources to engage. And it just is another way of helping us perform at our best. But the actual knowledge that you learn also helps you perform at your best. If you can read a formation as a defensive player, know they're running it this way, obviously you're going to play better. You're going to have a better chance of performing better. Same thing in any sport. Even in golf, like if you know, and I work with a lot of golfers, like to go and play a course you've never played before, you're at a huge disadvantage mentally. But if you've played that course multiple times and you know what's around that bend, you know the distance of this and how the wind blows in this hole, obviously mentally you have a lot more confidence. So that goes into the mental side of building resources and training the mind to enhance performance. The body side is what you worked with. The soul side is probably the most important and probably the hardest, because the soul is...
What are the components of the soul?
The soul would be emotions, right?
Okay.
So anger, obviously we don't want to have anger.
Where's fear? Is fear in there?
Fear would definitely be emotions. You know, fear would fit into that. What helps the soul? What training do we do? I put meditation into the category of the soul. Okay. I think that when we take that time and meditate and we anchor ourselves, as Kobe Bryant says, anchor ourselves to the day, like we are also controlling our emotions. And we're more aware of when it starts to shift, when we start feeling anger, when we start feeling jealousy, when we start, our emotions start taking over and playing a bigger role than they should. And the soul, by training our emotions through things like meditation, breath work, all those type of things, then we can also keep the soul in check and use these techniques when we feel like we're off. I don't use the term good or bad often. You know, I don't tell an athlete you played bad. Why did you play bad? I usually will use the term, and I'll ask them, like, how did you feel? Did you feel a little off?
What was going on?
Yeah, and that term's not quite as obviously negative, but okay, yeah, I felt a little off, coach. Well, what was off? And then they'll just start. They know, and by listening to them, you can start categorizing things. Oh, that was their mind, that was their body, that was their soul, and then you start making your adjustments.
Right. Wow. So with athletes, you'll ask them open-ended questions about how they were feeling versus what happened, essentially.
Yeah, the best, and for parents, parents.
Yeah, there you go. Great segue.
One of the worst things you could do as parents is to get them in the car after the game.
Yeah.
And say, what's the matter? Like, we drove all the way here to this tournament.
Yeah.
I spent all this money, and that's what you do? That's the worst thing you can do.
Yeah, guilty as charged sometimes. I have been that parent from time to time.
As have I.
I created a 24-hour rule with my kids, and because I had this when I was a coach. So when I was a coach, and youth sports is incredibly difficult to coach if it's competitive youth sports. And so, here in the Sacramento area, I was head coach of a football team here, and I quickly realized that one of the worst parts about it was dealing with the parents. It was very difficult because every parent thinks their kid is fantastic, thinks they should be playing, right? I mean, thinks they're better than the next kid, just about across the board, right? You start the season, then you kind of go on and you kind of figure out who's who, and a lot of times that becomes obvious to see. But I had a rule that it was, do not talk to me 24 hours. I would have a team meeting, and I would say, 24 hours after a competition, like between the time the competition ends, 24 hours before you send me your complaint, right? Which is probably a lot, right?
Yeah.
But also, a lot of times it still wouldn't matter, right?
Yeah,
because parents would. So fast forward to, I stopped coaching, have a kid, or I've had kids obviously, but more in the parent role. I decided to make that rule of 24 hours, right? Before I said anything about the competition, positive or negative. And I felt like that has probably been, unless they bring it up. If they want to talk about it, then I'll talk about it. If they bring up how it went. But if they don't want to bring it up, then I try not to talk about it. And that's my rule that I give. I mean, is that?
No, it's
what do you think there?
It's brilliant. Yeah. And interesting enough, about 2 weeks ago, I went to a Dodger game. I live in Los Angeles, so I was at a Dodger game. They were playing the Giants, and it was their worst loss of the season. The Giants were just on fire. Nothing could go right for the Dodgers. They just got smoked. And ironically, I was meeting with Dave Roberts, the manager, after, and went back there. And he came into his office, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is the worst time in the world. Like this, they just got, and he was so level-headed. And I asked him, I said, what do you say to your team after something like that? And he's like, we play hundreds of games, like, and we're professionals. Like, I don't say anything. Like, I will grab a few players personally, and because you might have a relief pitcher that didn't even get in, or another player didn't even play, and this player's worried about this. And so right after the game, win or lose, we'd come together, but it's really quick. And then I might grab someone individually and say a little something, and let's talk tomorrow. And so the same thing. And Dave Roberts is like one of the best managers in baseball, and and so if he's doing it, if it's good enough for him, and seeing what he's done with the Dodgers, then obviously there's something to that take the emotion out, and then put the intellect in, and it may take a while to take the emotion out. It takes emotions a little bit while to get away, and maybe by looking at it and thinking at it and seeing film, then the intellect comes in. So you'd much rather have intellectual conversations and decisions made versus emotional decisions made, which happen.
Would you say, if I'm a parent and I am that parent that gets in the car and it's 20 minutes of a review of what just happened and what they did wrong and everything else, is that parent too attached to the kid's success? What would you like? What is your opinion about that? What do you think? As far as I don't know what the science says, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are on what's going on in that situation.
I don't know if you can be too attached. There are kids, for crying out loud, right? Like that's the greatest thing we have is parenthood, and,
right?
I got 5 of them, so I'm definitely attached because we want it so bad. Like the saying is, your father or your mother are the only people on this earth that want you to be better than them.
Yeah.
And it's true.
It's true.
You want it so bad, and you see the work.
Yeah.
And you want it, and then can you be too attached?
I guess if you're a parent and you're feeling like, as a parent, I feel sometimes like I've wanted it more than my kids, and I tell them I can't want it for you. Like I can't want it more than you want it.
Yeah. As a coach, you feel the same way all the time. You feel like you want it more. Like I go home and I don't sleep. They go home and they're out at the club, and then 30 minutes later after getting beat, right? And like, there's something wrong here. So as a parent, it's okay to be attached. It's okay to cheer. It's okay to be the greatest advocate for your son or daughter. There's nothing wrong with that. It's how you display it and how you show it through your actions and your words that really matter, right? Yeah. And so by getting a kid in and in your body, in everything in your body emotionally is telling you, you're better than that. You can do better than that. You're better than that. You deserve more. Those are all good, positive things, right? But how does it come across to a 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old kid? Yeah. It comes across as dad's yelling at me because I didn't win, because I'm not good enough.
The message.
He's mad at me. Yeah. Like, of course that's how he's going to interpret it, because that's exactly how he feels. And his reality, it's his reality. You might be trying to say something totally helpful. You might be trying to give him energy and boost him up, but he or she, they're hearing something different. So just be very cognizant of how you word it, when you word it.
You think parents should wait?
Most definitely.
So how long do you think? I had a 24-hour. Do you think that's
24-hour rule sounds great to me. It's really maybe hard 12, to go back
6.
24 hours. Right. And I think there's nothing wrong with having that conversation in the car on the ride home. I don't think it has to be that long. But again, that conversation can be said in a way to where you let them lead the conversation and still get out your message. How'd you feel? Not good. What, did you feel like you were a little off? Yeah, I was a little off. Well, what do you think was off? and let them talk. Let them talk. And then you interject your wisdom with them. And now you're coming to a conclusion. You're learning from loss together versus telling them they're a loser. Right? There's a big difference between learning from loss and being a loser. Sports is beautiful in that there's no gray, right?
Yeah.
I did this for 25 years. Friday night, I was either a winner or a loser. You could see it on the scoreboard.
Right.
But is that my identity, or is that just the score of the game? Well, a lot of times it becomes our identity. And I felt like a loser, or I felt like a winner. Well, just imagine a young kid who just lost or just got beat, and then their parents telling them they just lost and got beat. They're going to feel like they are a loser, although the message might be a really positive message. So let them dictate the message, and then you kind of guide it to with the wisdom that you have from your years and your love as a parent to get it to where, okay, we learned from this loss, but don't feel like a loser.
Don't feel like a loser. Yeah. I feel like the kids can definitely get that mixed up, especially because they just came out of this emotional, this highly, highly emotional state.
Yeah.
And then if their parents are highly emotional afterwards, and I mean, I've heard this, I've seen it, where parents are walking in, berating a coach after the game. I mean, this is high school, right? Like
Sure.
I've heard it, and it is just, it's baffling to me, because it's not productive.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yeah, but in the moment,
if you're a parent,
as a parent, it's like they've got so many emotions going.
So what would a tool for a parent maybe that's feeling that way, that's just, let's say this situation, I'm a parent, I just watched my kid lose his starting job right there on the field or on the court. I just watched them get pulled out. They were having a horrible game, and I'm watching now on top of that, I'm just watching the kid in front of him have a ton of success, and the team's having a ton of success. And that parent, what do you tell that parent in the moment of their feeling from that? Like that situation, let's say it's right after the game, they're enraged, they want to go talk to the coach, they want to yell at the kid, they're just trying, what do you tell that parent?
Yeah. Don't. Don't.
Don't.
Like, what's the end goal here? Is the end goal to
Fight, flight, or freeze? What do you tell them?
In this case, we're gonna try to get into the parasympathetic nervous system. We're gonna try to calm. You need calmness and focus in that, because anything that you say right then, like, you can't take that back, and you might eventually hurt the kid because of your love of the kid to a coach. And the coach needs to know you're on the same side, and so you're probably going to want to talk to the coach.
Right.
But when you talk to that coach, it's got to be in a term of, hey, coach, I saw it. I watched the game like you watched. I saw what happened. But you and I also have seen my daughter perform. That's why she was starting up until then.
Right.
Like, all I want is the best for her, and you want the best for your team. So the better they are, my kid is, the better your team is. How do we get there? How do we get there? How do we get there? And you'll be surprised at how many coaches appreciate that way, because they're not coming at you. They're not saying you're an idiot. I'm so much better. Because as a coach, I've never once had someone call me and say, hey, I think Johnny should play in front of my son, right? Never once. But I've had hundreds of times, I think my son should play in front of Johnny. So as a coach, you already have to look at the parent. But all of a sudden, when that parent comes and says, how do we get there together? Then they'll probably share a little bit more, and you might be able to learn a few things. And again, as a parent and as a player, it's so important to understand what you can and can't control, and put your time, energy, and commitment into what you can control. You can't control the starting lineup. You're not the coach, but you can control how you approach it. So, gosh, that's a hard question. I wish that on no one. I've experienced it as a player and as a coach and all that, winning and losing, and as a parent for sure. I've got 5 kids, and 3 of them have played college sports, and I got another one that probably will. It's still in high school, so like I've seen it at all levels, and it doesn't get any easier, right?
Right.
It's not an easy thing. But
are they basketball players?
My oldest daughter was a rugby player.
Okay.
Yeah. My second son was a football player. My third son, my oldest daughter was a rugby player. Lost in the national championship to Michigan.
Wow.
And my oldest son was a football player. And then my middle son, I have 3 sons, plays basketball for the University of Arizona. So a little bit of both. My youngest son's a basketball player.
Wow.
And then my second daughter actually was a very good water polo and swimmer, but didn't do it collegiately. So I don't want to leave her out. She was actually a very good athlete.
And what's the youngest? Is it the youngest now?
Yeah, he's 17, and he's a junior in high school.
Okay. What sport?
Plays basketball.
Basketball. Okay.
So I have 2 basketball players, 1 swimmer rugby player, 1 football player, and 1 rugby player. My oldest son was a basketball player as well. He was good in both, but he went collegially. He played football.
Now, how do you deal with Coach Dad coming out?
All the time. You better believe it.
Coach coming out and Dad, and how do you deal with that?
Coach comes out individually.
Okay.
I am the quietest coach. I'm the quietest parent at the games. All right? I don't say anything. I rarely sit with other parents. It's hard for me because of my background. A lot of time they look at me and all of a sudden they'll be like, "What's he doing?" And I don't. I've been on the other side of that.
Oh.
We are pro coach in my family.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We support and especially outwardly. I sit quiet. My children's mothers would often say, "You got to tell them how to break a press." I'm like, no, I don't. Because I know that I've had hundreds of parents saying the same thing about me. So we're pro coach. I do my coaching individually with the kids outside of their team. Like we'll work out all the time together, and we'll set goals together, and we'll talk about things together. That's where I coach them. But once they're in their team setting, that's not my job. I am then a parent, and I'm supportive. And it would be very, very, very rare for me to ever confront a coach and talk about my son or my daughter. I've done it, but I can't even think of. I'm sure I've done it, but it would be rare. I kind of let that happen. I think that process needs to happen. I think they need to feel like they have to earn their spot through their coach that they have in that particular time, and respect him or her if that decision isn't made, and then control what they can control. So. I don't know if that's the right way. That's just my way.
Yeah, that's good. Have you ever been in a situation where a coach is maybe teaching your kid, and I would assume this probably is in basketball, something that you know that is not to be correct, or that you have a much different opinion
Philosophy
about?
on? Oh,
yeah. And how have you dealt with that?
All the time.
Okay.
Because and there's a lot of good ways to do it too.
Okay.
And so philosophy-wise, there's been times where I've seen it and I've been like, oh, I disagree with that. I actually have. I think the time I have talked to a coach was more along those lines, but it wasn't personal. It wasn't about my son. I've approached a coach about some things like approaching actual technical things and come as an advisor. And asked to say if you ever need it. And this was actually, I had a good relationship. Still do have a good relationship with the coach. This coach actually invited me into practice and said, let's work on that. Like, can you help us with that? And so I came in, and so I played a role of like, I did some things in practice to where, it was for the team. It wasn't individually for my son. It was as a team. I've had some things. I have had experiences with that, but actually, I kind of have to bite my tongue.
Yeah.
Right? And that's probably the hardest thing is when I see something, but also I'm not at practice. And I don't know,
right.
And I don't know the dynamics of that team. I think I do because of my background, but realistically, I don't know. And then I know I'm a father, so I get more concerned about my kids. And I got to step. That's where your 24-hour rule. I never thought of it that way. That's great. That probably works. And I'll be emotional after a game for sure.
Yeah.
Personally, I'll be emotional. I'll drive home and I'll be like upset. And I'm glad I'm emotional.
I'm the same way. There are times where I am just deep breathing.
Yeah.
I'm deep breathing in the car on the car ride home because it's it's here as a parent. Yeah. It's ready to come out, and it's just like I know it's not the time. I know it's
and there's been times where I have let it come out.
Yeah.
And it started small and it just grew as I thought. I remember by the time I got home, my son was like, "Wow." I'm like,
what's going on?
And I had,
Dad, do you need to talk
the
Dad?
next day, I'm like, hey, you know what? I lost it. I apologize. And now you're apologizing. So that's happened a few times.
Well, I think that's good though. I mean, if you're apologizing as a parent, I find that to be one of the challenges of my life is apologizing to my kids after maybe I've done something has been something that has been a constant battle for me to do personally. And then especially amplified in sports.
So as an athlete, one of the things that we all have to learn, and I learned this years ago, and when I first heard it, I just hated the term surrender moments. And so you're sitting there thinking as a coach and as an athlete, I would never surrender. We would never surrender. I would never admit defeat. I ran out of time. They weren't better, But there are times, for sure, as parents that we, that as people, we need to understand. Sometimes we need to just surrender and say, let's reevaluate and try another thing. This didn't work, and there's actually becomes power in surrendering because you actually still control the outcome, right? Right. And I'm not saying, as a coach, like give up, but as a parent, like you might have these emotions, these feelings about the coach, and you want to say something so bad. There's times when you got to surrender those and just understand that it's going to work out. There's a lot more out there. Let the kid let it happen, and then take some time. And usually, like you said, 24 hours, you probably think a little bit differently.
Right. The overall development of the kid, of the young athlete, the child that should be probably at the center.
For sure.
Of what happens, but sometimes that doesn't happen. How do you keep? How would you tell a parent to kind of keep the long term? Because kids develop at different paces, and I see this a lot in youth sports where there's such a focus, and I understand it. I take a little bit of an issue with how competitive we get at a young age these days because it seems as if youth football, AU basketball, there's such a focus on winning and I'm talking, when I say young age, I'm talking like 8, 9, 10, winning these championships and putting together these super teams. And I think what gets lost in that is the individual athletes. I mean, they're all different stages in the development. So if I'm a parent and I have a kid and I have this choice to make between putting my kid on this super team, right, or where maybe he's not going to play a lot, or put him on the team maybe his skills should be on, right? What do you tell a parent that might be better for his development? How do you keep? How would I, as a parent, keep on track of the development, and when would it be time to maybe put him on a better team and challenge him versus not?
I think I would always lean towards actually putting him on a team where they play and they enjoy it versus a team that maybe has more like a bigger travel team or has more recognition and he comes off the bench, or he or she comes off the bench. Especially at a younger age, I'd put it more on where they're having the most fun. I know that's a weird term, and coaches say it all the time, and I hate it. I'd go out there, they'll all week they'll yell at you, they'll drill you, and then right before the game starts, now go out there and have fun. Well, coach, none of this has been fun up until now. I don't even know how to have fun, right?
Right.
So, but at that age, yeah, most definitely keep it fun. These parents that worry about the 8th grade rankings, it's ridiculous. I'm going to say that very clear. It's absolutely ridiculous. I spent 25 years. I never made one single decision on what the 8th grader was ranked in my recruiting. Okay. Right. Or what team they played on. Okay. It was about the kid, and it was about what type of character.
And you've been a D1 head coach.
Yeah, I was a Division I head coach. I spent 25 years as a Division I coach.
Wow.
In the SEC, in the Pac-12, Pac-10 at the time. Big West, Mountain West. I've high school, junior college, Division I, and I was, Boston Celtics. I was a scout. So we were now building NBA teams, and it didn't matter if they came from Duke or they came from right here locally, Sac State, right? Like if they could play, they can play. So don't go there. Don't fool yourself. And
so as 8th graders, you never looked. You didn't care what anything.
No.
What team they played for, their ranking, none of that.
Seniors in high school, I didn't care.
Yeah. Oh wow.
I wanted the kid.
So what was the criteria?
And in the NBA, I didn't care.
Yeah.
I didn't care.
So as a college coach, what was your criteria then when you're looking at kids? What would you look for? The kid, like overall.
Okay, so overall, if you're actually talking, we're getting into recruiting now.
Yeah.
which I love, by the
Yeah.
way. Parents hate this answer, but it's true. The very first thing I look for is a genetic freak. Yeah,
Okay.
I really do.
Right.
And it's the old, you can't coach a 7-footer. Well, or you can't teach that. So yeah, you look for a guy that's a little bigger, stronger, faster, longer, quicker. But there's only certain schools that you can get those guys.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Right. So that's the first thing. It's true. But then after that, you look at skill set.
I'm glad you said it because I don't think everybody acknowledges that. So
for sure.
The prototypical athlete,
especially
is
in the
first thing
NBA.
that's looked at. Okay.
Especially in the NBA. I'm looking at these guys. I mean, Giannis's nickname is the Freak for a reason.
Right.
He is. He's incredible. And like anybody whose nickname is the Freak, I'm signing them
right.
sight unseen. Like I just want that kid. So that's the first thing, because you feel as a coach, if you're doing your job, then you can develop all these things. If they have these God-given talents where their wingspan is 7'6", like that's going to help.
Yeah, they can jump.
They can get.
Right, yeah.
They can the I don't know if I can explain this well, but what was his name? Luke. He was the center for the Bulls from Australia. Luke, what's his last name? Longley. Luke Longley.
Luke Longley, yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Luke Longley. I heard him speaking one time, and he told the story, and he was on the board. And he said Phil Jackson would do the X's, the 5 X's on defense, and he said, "Okay, Luke, you're going to be here. Kerr, you're going to be here. Harper, you're going to be here. 3 little X's. Scottie Pippen, you're here. Michael Jordan, you're here. Huge X's.
Right.
And so, I want my X's to be bigger than your O's. And if I'm a good coach, usually I'll be a good coach if my X's are bigger than your O's, right?
Right.
So that's the first thing you look for. Now, once you get past that, then you're definitely looking for skill set. You're looking for someone that competes. Character plays a huge role in this. All the things that does this. And when I was in the NBA, the questions, I used to say this all the time. Sitting in a bar, watching a game, everybody in that bar can look at the same game, and almost 100% of the people will tell you who's the best player. It's really easy to see the athletic. But which one of those can affect winning, which one of those fits your program, which one of those is going to be at the gym at 6 in the morning when he needs to be, that's the other things. And that's where really good recruiters and really good people in the draft, they do that homework. Whereas the genetic freak, although that's what you want the most, is the easiest to find. It's that second and third level that is the hardest that, those guys last. So once you get past the athleticism, then you start breaking down character and skill set and coachability and those things. And every coach wants that. Coach doesn't want a parent that's a helicopter, doesn't want a helicopter parent.
Right.
So these helicopter parents are always involved and always sending videos and always doing this and always that. You're hurting your kid. It's tough.
Right.
And so my advice to any parents about that, because that's who we are now. That's the society we live in. We live in where there's an 8th grade ranking, 9th grade, a national championship in the 8th grade. We live in that society. Don't buy it. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. Okay, the people making the decisions aren't. Why would you? Appreciate and put your time, energy, and commitment into the journey, and do that every day.
Right.
And the destination will take care of itself. And if the destination is a D1 scholarship, it'll happen. It'll happen because the coaches making those decisions are really smart and they do their job. I can attest to that.
Right.
You're going to find your son or your daughter if they're good enough. Don't worry about all the other stuff.
I got you. So that parent, the answer is put the kid where they're going to play.
Yeah,
Right?
put them where they're going to
play.
Put them where they're going to play. They're going to enjoy it.
They'll develop. They'll have fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially at that age, and we're talking that younger age. And then on the recruiting side, so how did you find? Did you use something to find mental monsters, or what traits? So you're building mental monsters right now, right? That's your business of building mental monsters. What did you do, or what do you think as a coach? What traits do they look for to flesh out who's a mental monster versus who's a mental minion?
Yeah. Mental monster versus
Right.
mental
Your
minion.
term.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the most identifiable ones is leadership.
Okay.
So there are no mental monsters that don't have the leadership trait. It's across the board. So leadership is something you can watch a game and you can see who the leader is, and you can especially watch a practice and see who the leader. I loved watching practice when I was a college coach and worked in the NBA. I loved going to practice because I wanted to see which one was the guy that was also going hard when no one was looking. Like, the trophy that is, the trophy that's in the trophy case was earned in a gym when no one was there, right? The parade through the city happened in an empty gym when those players were working out and earning it. So I like that time. So I really like watching when I was a scout and when I was a recruiter, how they practiced and how they interacted with their teammates and how they interacted with their coach. Obviously, if you do your work, you're going to ask. I mean, I asked janitors, custodians, tutors, bus drivers, girlfriends, parents of girlfriends, parents, obviously, everybody I could. Managers are great. I'd always take the managers out when I was in the NBA. Always. Go into a town, see a kid, watch him, meet the managers. Hey, what are you guys doing? Can I usually managers love sports and they love that. And so can we talk some sports? And I'd take them out, and eventually we'd eat and we'd get around, and then I'd get around to, hey, how does so-and-so, like, what kind of guy is he? Does he ever ask you to get him into the gym? Oh, he's in the gym all the time, coach. They're not going to lie to you.
Yeah.
They're going to, or they're going to say, he's kind of a pain in the butt. Like, treats me like crap because I'm the manager. Ooh, that's a red flag. Right. Yeah. And you can tell. And you can tell the ones that just, most of them, if it's bad, they just don't say anything. They're not trying to sell out this, but they just won't say anything. But the ones that say, that light up, like, oh, he's great. He's so much fun. Like, everybody loves him. Like, you can tell. And so I would get that. Those were really good.
Right. So research gets, so you're looking for leadership is probably the biggest thing. At practice is a really good time. So if I'm a kid, I'm making sure I'm practicing all of the things that you're telling me, right? Mind, body, soul.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So we're keeping that sharp, and then make sure at practice we're showing leadership skills. What type of leadership skills stand out to you?
Positive mindset, to where a leader is in the front, not pushing from the back.
Right.
Yeah. So you can see it. I love watching them run lines. Simple thing.
Tells you a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, tells you a lot. And who finishes first, who finishes last,
Who touches the line?
who touches the line, who misses it.
It was a great story that you told about
Derek Fisher
yesterday. Yeah. So about that. That's leadership.
Leadership, you bet. And like that tells you a lot. And because it's a 30-second sprint isn't that hard, and you might be tired, but a mental monster is going to do that 30 seconds, and a leader is going to finish that and finish first or second. They're going to give it. That stuff's really important.
Okay. So last night there was a couple techniques, or a couple things that I said had grabbed my attention, and one of them was the repetitive thoughts. I feel like that's a big one, right? The repetitive thoughts, the negative thoughts. Can you explain just that little segment, and then what are some solutions that our audience can have?
So if we, again, going back to the science of man, and you see how we've evolved, is our mind, both subconsciously and consciously, studies, there's such a range of studies on this, but some of the latest come to anywhere from 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts a day, consciously or subconsciously. Wow. But the interesting thing about that is that 90% of those thoughts are repetitive thoughts, and 80% of those are actually negative, which, gosh, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't feel negative. I don't feel like I'm having negative thoughts. But the going back to that society that we come from,
right?
That kept us alive.
Right.
That was a survival mechanism. You're not good enough to leave the cave. Don't go over that range. Don't go chase down that. Don't do that. Don't do that. You're not good. Just stay here. Stay in the group. Survive. Live one more day. Take one more breath. And so we have this inner critic that's very active within us, especially subconsciously, that's telling us, no, you can't, you're not. And it's constant. It's nonstop. Interesting enough, I experienced this myself. I was studying, I was writing a research paper on the inner critic, got up, went to go get a drink out, walked back and sat down. And when I walked back and sat down, I saw a mirror that was next to me. And as I walked back, I saw that mirror and I saw, oh, that shirt, when's the last time you've run? You're not looking very good. You need a shave. You look like you could get out. And I sat down and I started studying this inner voice, and I had to stop and I said, oh my gosh. I would have not ever even known I said those 8 different negative things about myself had I not been studying about the inner self, the inner critic. And I stopped there and I went back and I did. I had 8 different negative things within 2-3 seconds about myself as I sat down. I didn't change. I didn't start crying. I didn't feel bad. I was fine. But my mind was telling me, no, you can't. You got to change. And so it's a survival technique. Once we know that, okay, once we are aware of that, our the self-critic, we need to understand it, that it's not necessarily a bad thing, that it's just who we are. But we also have to build up what I call the inner advocate. Okay. Now, the inner advocate is also that voice within inside you that is more powerful than the inner critic, but not as heard. Okay? The inner critic is the person in the room that talks all the time, pretends like they know everything, wants attention on them, and the inner advocate is the wise grandma that's over here,
right,
that just sits there but knows the answer. Again, in recruiting, I used to try to find that person in the room. Like this uncle's always talking about how this, that, and that, but who's really making the call? Well, the inner advocate's that person. The inner advocate actually knows the self best and believes in yourself, but is rarely heard. We need to train the inner advocate, and that's through mindset work, positive mindset work, anything from I am statements. I think they're great.
Give me an example of an I am statement.
I am confident. I am a good person. I am friendly. I'm capable.
Do you back that up?
I am a hard worker.
Do you back that up with yourself with the reasons? I am because, or is it?
You back that up with resources.
Resources, gotcha. Okay.
So your resource work, so if you were to, and how I teach it is, I think it's very important to constantly be searching for things that you're good at. Okay, and the reason being is you send a message when you start. You have this inner critic, but we know that the mind is only capable of, just like light and darkness, the mind is only capable of one thought at a time. Now, these people say, I multitask. That's actually not true. There's no such thing as multitasking. You can do a lot of tasks immediately after each other, but the mind can only hold one thought at a time. So when you are actively searching for something positive, the inner critic is gone, and it's being replaced by the inner advocate, and you're actually training the inner advocate to trump the inner critic. So when my athletes on an in-breath thinks I am, 6 seconds, and an out-breath thinks confident, and then I have them change it the next breath, and the next breath, and the next breath. And I say, take, a 12-second breath. You take five breaths in a minute. Okay, you want to do 5 minutes, or 3 minutes, 15 breaths, or 25 breaths. I'll tell them, give me 25 breaths of I am statements, all confident. And so their mind has to start actively searching for things. That I am confident. I am nice. I am a mental monster.
Right.
They have to keep finding these things. But what it does is it's an actual technique to where now the mind is searching for that advocate and finding that advocate, and it's coming forth. So rather than having this inner critic that's always negative, we're tapping into the inner advocate. And so at 54 years old, I still do that. I spoke in front of a bunch of kids yesterday, okay? I've spoken in front of thousands of people. I've played games in front of the nationals. I've done all this. I was going to a high school, a bunch of high school athletes, and I was speaking in front of them. I still had feelings. I still had emotions.
Right.
I still had like a little bit of anxiety, for sure, and I'm glad I did. And so what did I do? I'm a great speaker. I know what I'm talking about. I'm confident. And just doing that, all of a sudden it triggers the resources of all the times I've done this before, the body believes I have resources to engage. All the good stuff happens. Now I start having the good stuff. The cortisol's lessened. The adrenaline's pushed out. I start having confidence. I'm clear. I have a better capability of performance. And just by simply saying I am. And these are triggers. Most of the time, this is a key. Most of the time in life when we hear triggers, they're always negative. Oh, I'm triggered by that. I'm triggered by that. I heard that. It triggered me. Well, we also have positive triggers. So an I am statement, meditation, visualization, those are positive triggers. So use those to trigger the best self.
Wow. So when you are feeling maybe in your feelings or whatever, being super critical, a good way to
I
do
call it
that
off.
is
When I feel off.
When you feel off, a good way to combat that is with I am statements.
Most definitely.
And mix that with some breaths is even better.
Sure. So I combine the two.
Right.
You can just do the I am statements.
Okay.
There's affirmations. Which,
Right.
You go in front of the mirror, talk to yourself.
Right.
Another great one is writing. Writing is wonderful. Like the act of physically writing. People can do it on text and they can have a journal, but if you physically, actually there's studies behind it. If you physically write, there's something about the mind where it puts that word, that pen and paper into motion, and you write about your feelings, you write about yourself, or you write statements, positive I am statements that really help.
Oh, wow.
Can't always do that if you're in a car, but you can always think.
Right.
And you can always breathe. At least I hope you're doing both. Are you
Right.
you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And so like anytime an athlete is going in there, anytime a parent feels that emotion coming on, I am patient. I'm a father first. I am capable of talking clearly to my son. I am capable of loving him regardless. I am capable of unconditional love. So, just those things trigger that inner advocate, which normally is very good. And obviously you want to trigger your best self.
Yeah. Wow, that is fantastic stuff there. So, Gib, you want to tell us about your Instagram and any projects that you're I know you're doing this Mental Monster. How can the audience support you?
I actually just started it. It's kind of ironic. I've started this. I have very little marketing, if none. It's all happened organically.
Okay.
I was in school learning it. A couple people, friends of mine, knew I was doing it. Some ex-players. I got a phone call one day from a former teammate of mine. Says, "Hey, I hear you're at Harvard and you're a sports psychologist." And I was like, "Well, not really, but I'm studying psychology at Harvard. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm working on it." And they said, "Would you work with this?" This friend of mine has a golfer just turned pro. He's struggling. So I started talking. From there, it spread. So I don't have, and it just kind of grew organically by itself. That was a couple years ago. So I don't have tons of marketing out there, but I did start an Instagram account just a couple days ago.
Okay.
It's Coach Gib, MindBodySoul. Very simple. And I'm going to start putting more of what we talked about, things out there. Coach Gib, MindBodySoul. If you want to go look at that, I'll put out videos and things and stuff that I do, things that other athletes have done, what other psychologists have done, sports psychologists, people in this field, and just get the information out. And it'll be a thing for parents to, that they can use. I work a lot with parents and kids just to help them become their best self, best athlete, best self.
Okay, so individually you work with people, and then organizationally as well. So high schools.
Yeah, I work some high schools, some college
clubs,
teams.
college teams, NBA teams, pro teams. They can all get a hold of you and say, "Hey, come on and speak," and you'll go out and you'll do that.
I
Okay.
do. That's what I do. And
that's your core business. Yeah, good.
So anybody wants to, reach out again through the Instagram is easy.
Okay.
I got an email, Coach Gib at MindBodySoul.
Okay,
reach
we'll
out.
post those.
I'll return every message, and in every seminar I do, I always put my cell phone up there, and I do. I have athletes reach out and text me, and I'll get back to them some way in 24 hours.
That's fantastic. I mean, I could sit here and talk to you for another 10 hours, right? But I think we've done 2 hours probably here.
All right.
And so I'm gonna ask you right now if you come back, later.
You bet. I'd love to.
Next time you're in town, I know you're not around here all the time, so would love to have you back on. And I'm sure there's so much more we can talk about.
I appreciate it. I loved it.
Man,
I love what you're doing here, and I'm glad I could be a little part of it today.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And so we'll make sure and post all those links there for Gib. and we'll have him on again soon. Thank you so much, Gib.
Thank you.